Balance and welcome to episode 16 of the Balance Theory podcast. Today's guest is a performance expert and keynote speaker who's obsessed with one question: how far can we stretch our genetic limit so we can achieve our maximum potential? She specialises in high performance and she's none other than the wonderful Alessandra Edwards. Today the big question is, what can our DNA tell us and how the hell can we even find that out? So she goes through beyond, once you do your little DNA sample, what information it actually tells us and what we can gain from it. So did you know that there are a lot of different genetic types which could explain your tendencies or preferences for certain behaviors? You might be sitting there thinking, well, this might explain different reasons why I'm a certain way or even why my partner's a certain way. And the funny thing is, a lot of us think if it's written in our code, does that mean we can't change it? Well, I asked Alessandra this and I was quite fascinated by her response. But I think the most interesting point of this whole conversation is that we all know that we're unique, but when you really break it down into your DNA, you can really extrapolate what diet is probably best for you. You know, are you more of a morning person or a night person? What are your stress markers? All these different things that will really help you align and understand how to balance yourself on a day-to-day basis. So it's not always as simple as try a keto diet or exercise 5 times a week. It really is about delving a little bit deeper and seeing what your genetic tendencies are and how to lean into those. We also have a really fascinating discussion about how even healthy habits can be likened to addictions like that of alcohol and drugs. So we end on a really, really cool mini discussion about that. And I think that will be a big takeaway for a lot of you. I really hope you enjoy this episode. I know that Alessandra has a book coming out shortly titled The DNA of Performance, which is available for pre-sale on her website, which is linked in the show notes below. So I'll let you guys check that out in your free time. But for now, enjoy. So Alessandra, welcome to the Balance Theory podcast. It's such an honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I was excited when you contacted me because I know we've had a couple of encounters, outside of this. So I was super excited.
Yeah, no, it's so nice going from having seen you, 2 years straight speaking at events and now having you on my show. So it's quite a little honor for me personally, but I really appreciate your time and I can't wait to download all your expertise for all our listeners today. So for everyone tuning in, I will let Alessandra tell us all about herself, but essentially what we're going to be focusing on through the lens of balance is, I guess, how you can not only understand but maximize your genetic code to really achieve performance and I think in turn balance. I think once you really fine tune and understand yourself on a deeper level, it really helps you bring everything to some sort of equilibrium that you just understand beyond an average life existence, I suppose. So I will let you explain a little bit more about what it is you do and how you even got to doing it. It's such a niche area and something I only really came into contact with once we met. So I'd love for you to share from your point of view.
Absolutely, of course. So I'll just keep my introduction brief, just because,
Sure.
All you need to know is basically I've got a background in health science and clinical nutrition, and then I've gone on to do further studies in genetics. And I actually, before doing this kind of performance work, I ran a clinic. It was a very successful clinic in Melbourne for a very long time. And I specialized in quite severe mental health issues and chronic conditions. So, anything from really major depression to chronic anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic fatigue, all those kind of, big things. And I used to work with a number of specialists and doctors who were fantastic in what they did. And then with some patients, they will get to a point where they literally were scratching their head. And so the highly successful treatments that they would normally give, other patients with the same diagnosis just didn't work. So if you like, from that perspective, I cut my teeth really in the trenches in terms of, there is nothing like working with someone who has suicidal ideations to get you really focused to help them, come back. It's a matter of life and death. And I feel super grateful and privileged that I was able to experience that and work with, an incredible number of people who, just through certain circumstances. And then, obviously, as I found out through genetics, and a mismatch between, how they live their lives and a mismatch between the experiences they had and how they managed their emotional well-being, in terms of their genetics, then sort of resulted in these really stubborn kinds of depressions. And nowadays I am really, really interested in the realm of, I call it high performance, and I call it high performance because I think it sounds really sexy. So I was always attracted from an early age to, I love Formula One. I just love anything that really, if you like. So to me, what Formula One cars do are, they are the ultimate summary of coordination of incredible effort, work, and knowledge, where you basically mix, form and function. So I've always been interested in that. And for me, high performance really is that. Yeah. So if you like, is what you said, is achieving balance, but then it's going well beyond. It's really tapping into this incredible capacity that as humans and individuals we have for personal power. And I think that very few of us get to live at that level, even though there's a gazillion people who, have a six-pack and, are really fit and have successful businesses. But the people that go beyond that and really tap into sort of this source of personal power are, I think, the real, game changers and life changers. So that's the work that I do, and that's what I'm fascinated by. And as you said, I utilize genetics, so particularly genetic well-being kind of testing, as opposed to traditional genetic testing, and biochemistry. So analyzing a person's, biochemistry through testing, and then developing strategies that help them really match, their actions. Yeah. So their what with their DNA. So their character, their who, to their being, so their purpose or their higher why.
Yeah. So how did you go from, I guess, let's take it back to when you were dealing with those patients who had no other option, it seemed like nothing would work for them, to go from them who seemed almost like, right at the bottom of where you could be, to being a high performance? Was your goal then to take them to sort of a medium point where they were just like managing an average and then to high performance? Or was that sort of a two separate developmental stage? Like, did you have to engage in more study to kind of do the high performance stuff and really delve into DNA? I'm just curious how you kind of went from that interest to what you're teaching and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So if you like, that part of my work was purely health. So it was really black and white. So, if someone is suicidal, then you get them basically to a stage where they can manage, with their medication, and then continuing on to helping them, regain their mental wellness, so that they're not on medication anymore, or they really reduce their medication. So generally speaking, those people were not like in the corporate space or business space, or it really was just a matter of life and death and just helping people, be well again. My interest into the whole thing and the genetics started on, much earlier than that. But the reason then I got into the high performance stage is that, so my husband's a CEO, and for years he'd been telling me, like, and asking me, why on earth are you doing this? This is so hard. Like, every day you carry so much responsibility, for someone's life. And that there are a gazillion people, poor people in corporate, who are stuck, who don't have any of this knowledge, and they're suffering. They're really suffering, and they don't know that they're suffering, because everyone is kind of head down, bottom up. So it was, if you like, my curiosity was piqued, and I just started to ask him to just introduce me to, a few people, to have conversations and run some surveys. So I got to ask a lot of questions, in the early days, and I started to realize that actually, it doesn't matter if you're a CEO or you're running a 1,000 people plus business. At the end of the day, we're all human. We've all got a DNA, and we still have to feed ourselves. We have to move. We have to sleep. We have to have purpose in life. So same, except that if you like, the stack of problems that people presented with,
similar,
changed. Changed from,
Yeah. So this is probably going to be my favorite question. And like, what and how can our DNA tell us? So people might be sitting here thinking, okay, that's great. Like, I know I've got DNA. I know it's like some sequence inside my body. How does one even go about getting that assessed? And then like, you know, even extrapolating, like what information could that give someone who's curious?
Yeah. So first I'd like to explain, you know, just in case someone sort of, one of your listeners hasn't really heard about, you know, genomic wellness, that I think that many people possibly still think about genetics as something that has a bit of a dark side, you know, that can basically sort of harbor the, you know, it's like having a crystal ball, and it can tell you like, where am I going to die, or will I get cancer, and you know, all the kind of really heavy things. And so that is not the kind of testing that we look at, for a number of reasons. That, you know, yes, there are genes that are called, you know, penetrating genes that, you know, if you have them and you have 2 copies, you will definitely develop a certain disease. And I'm more in the realm of empowerment and helping people increase their level of self-efficacy and agency. And I think that, you know, I'm not really equipped to help people with that. I'm not a genetic counselor, you know, that does a lot of work in helping people come to terms with the fact that at some point they will develop these terrible illnesses. So I'm more interested in helping people understand, okay, look, this is the toolkit that you've been given. And, you know, my son always used to say he'd go to parties and he'd be given a loot bag at the end. And sometimes the loot bag had all his favorite sweets or little toys. And sometimes, especially if it was you know, a girl's birthday party, he would just get things like stickers and colored pens, and he had no interest in those. So he just developed this thing, and I don't know where he heard it, where he would look at it, obviously feel a bit disappointed and go, you know what, you get what you get and you don't get upset. So it's the same with sort of the genomics of wellness. So we're given this toolkit, and some of us have some really shiny, pointy kind of super sharp tool. Yeah. And for some of us, you know, we don't have the super sexy tools. Like some of us just get a screwdriver. Okay. You know, some of us, you know, don't get like the amazing chainsaw and all those fancy things. So
some of us will stay driving on the suburban roads, and others will go to the F1.
That's right. So, but what you glean in terms of the knowledge, you know, in terms of going back to your question, is really understanding what this toolkit is. So, for example, you can learn a lot about, you know, what are your traits? Yeah, what are your tendencies? Say we look at stress. Do you tend to genetically have, you know, a really, really quick fire response to stress? And are specific stresses more trigger happy for you than others? So, you know, I know at the moment there's all this whole thing about, you know, doing ice baths and all that kind of stuff, but some people genetically actually really triggers a massive adrenaline response. And so, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad for them to do the ice bath, but if they are already in a really stressful environment and they're not sleeping and they're feeling really anxious and there's overwhelm galore, you know, doing the ice bath in the morning is not going to be their best serving behavior in order to enhance, you know, that genetic response.
Yeah.
So you can find out about the stress. You can actually find out, you know, what's the optimal fuel that you need for your body? What do your genes like, you know, to really thrive with ketosis? Yeah. Or are you setting yourself up for long-term consequences of that ketosis? Because actually you have a lot of genetics related to fat metabolism that don't like having a lot of saturated fat in the diet from meat. And so you might feel really good initially, and then 2 years down the line, you know, you're like many of the clients who've done, you know, keto for 2-3 years, and they feel like a shocker. We do all the biomarkers also of their cardiovascular health, and everything is out of whack. Their gut microbiome is completely decimated. So it gives you that kind of understanding. Should I focus more on plant food-based diets? Should I have high protein diet? Should I have a high carb diet? And it's a bit like, you know, having the car and working out, well, you know, if I use diesel in a non-diesel car, like, I don't even know what would happen because I'm not a mechanic, but I imagine at some point something will go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah, it can also tell you, like, I love nutrition in terms of both food and also supplements. I think supplements are awesome when they're used really well. So it can basically tell you at genetic level what vitamins potentially you're actually going to need more of. Yeah. And in some cases, it's enough to tweak the diet, but in other cases, you have so many genes in a specific, related to a specific vitamin, that you actually need to do more. So I work with so many clients who have a specific B12 genetic variant. That means that, even if they eat red meat every single day, they will still have a deficiency inside the cells. So for them, we need to do injections, and they feel amazing within 2 injections, for example. It can also tell you your power of detoxification, for example. So, we live surrounded by toxicants, and we can't go off and live on an island where everything is pristine, because it's...
If only we were a Kardashian right now and could go hire an island for all our friends.
Yeah, although to be fair, they put so much stuff on their skin that I don't think that, they take the pollution with them.
Keto.
Yeah. So it will tell you, you'll find out, okay, are there certain things that I can do to, help my liver, work a little bit faster, for example. Yeah. Is this going to impact, for example, as a woman, my estrogen balance? And that's, really relevant in terms of our energy. So many women suffer with their hormones, for example. It affects their mental health for part of the month, and it affects their sleep, and then that affects how they interact with others, so when they show up at work. There are so many different things that we can look, through the genetics. Also, we can look at, if you like, not necessarily the rate of aging in the sense of predicting, how long you're going to live, but we can definitely look at the genes of youth that keep your DNA youthful, without many genetic mistakes at DNA level. And if you don't, like me, so you're prone to premature aging, what do we do? Yeah. So how do we introduce specific foods, specific supplements? Is exercise going to be the right thing, when already, my cells age faster? Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. There's so much packed into that. Like it's almost like, I feel as though anyone could really take their life experience to another level with that kind of knowledge. It's almost like we've all got this underlying code, shall we say, that could tell us so much about the right way or the ways it's more conducive to how we're wired, that this sort of understanding could really take anyone to the F1 track if you want. But I know, like, in having seen you do a couple talks, I know that you do break up the genes into different genetic types. So can you tell me a little bit about what those types are, and maybe if there's any way people off the bat might have a understanding as to which type they generally fall in or what that means?
Yeah, of course. So I really like, I get excited about subjects that then we can make really accessible. Yeah, because really, even with my background, I find it really boring when I go to scientific conferences. It's like, just bring this to life a little bit. So, and not everyone can do genetic testing, right? So I've developed, if you like, these different signatures. So there's one that, let's talk about, we'll talk about like the stress signature. Okay. And so basically what you can do with the stress signature, you can just by me asking you a few questions, you can already start working out, what this signature is, meaning how are your genetics sort of influencing how you relate to stress, and how you react to stress. So, for example, so one of the stress signatures is the CEO signature. Okay, so as you know, I work a lot with senior executives and seasoned leaders, and it's getting to the point where we're reaching about 90% of clients who work in through those environments who actually have the CEO signature. Okay, so it's almost like every time, without even needing to do the blood test, the DNA test, I can work it out. So if you have the CEO signature for stress, what you will find, and this would be true not just recently, but of your entire life, from an early age,
Yeah.
that you would be someone who basically feels pretty confident in themselves. Yeah. So as a kid, you might have been the one who was kind of, if the teacher said, right, dividing groups, like you'd be the one that kind of rallying people, right, we're going to do this, right, this is how the activity is going to go. So you kind of really attracted to position of leadership. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be in corporate, but just, you feel comfortable, being at the top. Yep. So yeah, taking the reins. You feel comfortable, and look, if truth be said as well, you feel like that's where you belong, and not everyone does. Yeah. So that's my spot. That's where I belong. So what happens then with the signature is that you generally at baseline. So, if you're given a project and stuff, you just get on with it. Yeah. No sweat, no stress. You just get on and just get stuff done. You tick things off. You've got good levels of internal motivation. Truth be said, you're probably quite a competitive person, and if you're really honest with yourself, you'll put yourself in the type A category of personality. And especially if you're male, because then you've got more hormone testosterone, which interacts with these genes, you are probably super competitive and you don't really like to lose. And you may have through the years, perhaps, created this facade, and you've worked out that no one likes a sore loser. So maybe like you've hacked yourself a little bit to kind of grit your teeth and go, no, that's okay that I've lost. But deep down, you'd like to be a winner. The other thing is you probably have a tendency also to have high libido. Yeah, this is true for men and women, but again, more for men. And generally speaking, where you're at right now, you have some kind of position of responsibility. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, you're probably not feeling too great about it. Okay, for whatever reason you're not. So that's the, if you like, the balanced genetic side of the CEO stress signature. Okay, and then every side has, if you like, a shadow. It's a bit like yin and yang. Yeah. So depending on how balanced your life is in terms of, and how matched to your genetics your life is, then you can either be in the space that I've just described. So, good mental energy, good motivation, great, good leader, all of those kinds of things, which are awesome. But if you have led your life and lived your life, and you're currently in a job that throws a lot of curveballs at you, there's really high levels of stress, so it's go all the time, lots and lots of responsibility, then what happens is that you can actually flip into the shadow side of these genetics, which is constant rumination. So you're the kind of person who you just can't switch off. Yeah. Say if you go on holiday and you go for a week, it's probably going to take you at least 3 days to wind down, and most likely you will still just be checking things and thinking things through. When you're really stressed, sleep is the first thing that goes, and you struggle to fall asleep, and then you wake up in the night having lots of thoughts. So you're always thinking solutions. So you're a solution-driven person. And so what happens is that because your dopamine and your noradrenaline are building up and up and up, because that's how these genes work, then what happens is that you can also start really living in the emotional sphere of frustration and anger. Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's a lot of frustration and anger, impatience, and there can be some anxiety, but it's all up here. Okay. Because these people have very active frontal lobes. And so that can then have a negative impact. So I work with some clients who have this, and they really have to watch themselves, because they start barking at people. So they start barking orders. And that really undermines how people view you, whether it's your friend or your teams, your colleagues. So that's the CEO. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we have the warrior. Okay. So they literally are the opposite, the polar opposites in terms of how their genetics work and how their chemicals work in the brain. So the warrior side is someone who, generally speaking, you're generally more on the chilled side. Yeah. So you consider yourself sort of more go with the flow. You can still have perfectionist tendencies, but overall, you're just quite comfortable. But what especially as you age, is that you actually crave variety. And you always did, even as a kid. So changes in routine didn't faze you. You loved when, things were kind of thrown out and things would be changed at the last minute. And you worked out in your adult life that, if you don't engineer variety in your schedule or even in your work day, things can start feeling same very quickly. And so what happens is that the shadow side for the warrior signature is that, your mood can start going down. So you're more prone to feeling low. Yeah, you can't be bothered to do things. You actually probably already know you're a procrastinator and you work really well with deadlines. But what happens with deadlines is, even if someone gives you a very long into the future deadline, you don't start working at it straight away. You leave it till the last possible minute and you fret in the meantime that, I should be doing this, I should be doing it, but you don't do it. But then when it comes to the crunch, the last couple of days or even the last 12 hours, you're like, boom. So your focus gets turned on and you just get stuff done. And so for this signature, what's really interesting is that then they actually work really well under pressure. So making their diaries busy with lots of different kinds of activities allow them to function at their best. So while the CEO is kind of not sleeping and, feeling overwhelmed and angry and, judgmental, the warrior side then really just engages. And so they feel alive, they feel on purpose, and they will still be feeling stress, but they just feel like they're the best version of themselves. And then in between, we have, basically, if you like, is a combination of the two. And this is what I call the king or queen signature. So at genetic level, they're called that, it's like they're in the sweet spot. Okay, so they have a little bit of both sides, but it means that generally they're balanced. So they've got good levels of self-motivation. They don't really tend to procrastination, but also they can take considerable amounts of stress. Yeah, they're quite balanced. Now, the downside for these types, for the king and queen type, is that they can then go either way. Okay, so they need a little bit of everything. They need a little bit of pressure and feeling a bit stretched. They need a little bit of variety, but not as much as the warrior type. And they also need a bit of downtime, from the CEO type. So, and generally speaking, we have about, 40% of the population that sit in the middle with the king and queen.
Based off their DNA, right?
Yeah. Based off their DNA in their signature. And then the other two are split in equal parts, so equal percentage. So so that's a good way that you can start working out. Go, I really see myself, or often like, I see my partner. My partner's a CEO for sure. Whenever he's stressed, always loses sleep. Yeah. So it's interesting to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So for someone listening who really wants to, I guess, dive into this head first, how would they even go about getting that assessed? Would it be through, do they still do it how they send you like a sample and you've got to go do like a blood test and all? Is that how it gets done?
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways to do it. There's lots of different labs, and then you will basically, and then you basically get like a printed report that's sort of, they literally have stuff that's written. If you have this gene, then this is the information. So they're generally saliva-based swabs, and then, not blood tests. So they're really easy to do. You can actually do children as well, because it's, you just use like a Q-tip and, you rub it by the side of the gum. So they're pretty easy to do.
Cool. All right. My next question is, if it's written in our DNA, does that mean we can't change? So if you're a through and through warrior, does that mean that's your destiny for life? The good and the bad, and how do you kind of navigate around people who do want to say be the CEO type but are not?
Yeah. All right. So for me, when I do sort of, the programs with my clients, the first thing I say is like, okay, so particularly because I use words like the CoWarrior, this is not on a scale in the sense that, there isn't a ladder where one is best and one is worst.
Yeah.
This is more about understanding who you are. And then that gives us a platform to start exploring your why. Okay. So I really, truly believe that everybody is given a genetic toolkit for a specific reason. Yeah. So you've been assigned a mission, okay, when you're born, but you don't know what that mission is. All you know is, the only clues is what your character traits are. Okay. And then you start interacting with the environment, how your parents treat you, what you eat when you grow up, whether you've got terrible stresses, etc. When you do the DNA testing, then you start to understand a little bit more, like you look behind and you see that you've got all these different tools and you go, okay, that's really interesting. Why have I got that tool? What is that for? And so, it's not about, so say like if we take Star Wars, it's not like everyone wants to be Han Solo, everyone has a specific script.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a really useful way to start asking deeper questions of what is my purpose in life? Why am I here? Why do I have this kit? Why do I have the kit that really increases my risk of chronic fatigue? Why have I experienced chronic fatigue? Why did I have to go through the restriction that, having that gave me? And within the context of COVID and what we've experienced is then you can start thinking in terms of, well, actually, on a mission, you are given, specific challenges that you need to overcome. And as you overcome the challenge, you actually gain knowledge. You gain incredible knowledge, you gain, incredible level of awareness, and that really makes you evolve as a person so that you can then progress through the levels that are just true to you, to your own mission. They're not universal levels that, everyone needs to be CEO type. Because if everyone were CEO type, then, where other people are kind of chilling out and creating art, right, for us to enjoy. So what is true is that we can't change the toolkit. That is, who you are. So if you do have tendencies towards the anxiety, if you have the tendencies towards depression, and if you have tendencies towards really high stress levels under overwhelm, that is who you are. You can't change that. Yeah. But what you can change is how those genes manifest. So you could say have the CO gene, and then you actually choose to, go down the route of competition after competition. Everything's super competitive. You choose the most cutthroat industry, like investment banking to work in, for example. And then you push yourself to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go and do really punishing workouts. And you get into this mindset that again, like winning is the best, and you need to always, you're never good enough unless you reach the next level. So all of those things are really going to aggravate your CEO genes. And so what they're going to do is they're going to crank up, those chemicals even more, so that then you totally become an absolute narcissist. So at the spectrum of the CO gene, then we actually have narcissism, we have bipolar disorder, we have schizophrenia. So it's all on a spectrum. So that is why we utilize that code to then create these personalized strategies that are just unique to you, and utilize things like, well, look, what, you're having a really high protein diet because you really want to bulk up. But, at genetic level, if you have so much tyrosine in your diet that comes from protein, we can see your dopamine levels go through the roof. And then not only are you doing that, but then you're doing all the other CEO aggravating stuff. So how about we start working specifically for you? We're creating pauses during the day to allow your nervous system to come down, to allow, your cortisol and adrenaline to come down. So while we can't change, the initial signature, we can change a lot of how we interact so that it's not so black and white.
Yeah. And I guess just from what you're saying, it's about really leaning into the tools you've been given. And you might be predisposed to certain things, but it's about how do you manage that? And you can, I guess, if you have a tendency to respond to stress, it's like, what tools can you supplement your existing set with to manage that. And yeah, I think that's great, because I think that really honors everybody's individuality and uniqueness, and says like, you are who you are, and that's great, and you can, you know, understand that to a deeper level to really take your life experience up and beyond. So I love that. I'm actually looking forward to when I get mine tested and working out where I sit on the spectrum. I think it's going to be interesting. But just as a bit of an overarching question, in your whole experience with health science and all this DNA stuff, have you found any, I guess, habits or rituals that are beneficial to everybody, no matter what genetic type you are? So is there anything that you would recommend to anybody, no matter what?
Absolutely. I mean, and you can read any single blog on well-being and they'll all say the same things. Yeah. So, you know, we all need sleep. We need rest. We need play. We need, you know, an unprocessed diet. We need sunshine. We need connection. So all of those things are true regardless of the genetics. It's just that, you know, it's a lot of stuff to do all of it.
Yeah.
And certainly, you know, the majority, or if not all of my clients, you know, would really struggle to do absolutely everything. So if you've got the time, absolutely, you can completely do that. The danger for me is also, you know, having met a lot of health zealots in my life, the danger is that I would always question any well-being or health habit or high performance habit if you feel that you have become the slave to it, the slave of it. Yeah. So if you, you know, if you can never, you know, skip a boot camp class, yeah, in order to meet your friends, or, you know, you never allow yourself to eat, you know, a couple of slices of banoffee pie in one sitting, or, you know, and you start living your life with rigidity related to things that are positive, you know, well-being habits, I would really, really question. For me, that's alarm bells. And I've had many conversations with people that are so black and white, and they usually hang out in very specific communities. And to me, that is the same as someone then who becomes addicted to something like alcohol. It's an addiction, and it's a way of refusing self. So it is no longer moving from a position of self-love and self-compassion. It's moving from a position of, I am not good enough and I need to punish me, with, you know, fasting or ice baths or whatever it is, and I can never allow any cracks in that armor, because if I do, you know, what I would see is just too scary. And so people protect themselves with these behaviors, and which reinforce their sense of identity around meaning. Yes. So I know who I am as long as I get up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym, or So that's the only thing I would say, which I think is not really talked about very much. It's about really, ultimately, it's all about self-love. That's all it is. It really is. It's about letting go of the competition, the ladder, and really truly living in this sense of state, you know, of communion with self.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And it really comes down to being intuitive with yourself. You know, like, we all know that exercise is great, but if you're just so tired and you've had a massive week at work and you need to skip a session, like, that is okay. That's what your balance requires at that point in time. And I always like talking about balance as not only like an overarching thing about your life, but it is a daily thing as well. It goes up and down, it fluctuates and changes. But I really, really like that tip, that point. Whatever habit, I guess, you're engaging in, it's not that your lifestyle needs to fit into it. It needs to fit into your lifestyle. And I think, you definitely couldn't go wrong in that way. Look, I think we'll leave it there. I know you're a very busy woman, and so I'm very grateful to have had you for these 40 minutes or so, and to be able to share this with everyone today. If people want to reach out or get to know a little bit more, or perhaps even engage you for what you do, how can they find you? Where's the best place?
Probably the best way to start is by, if you go to my website, alessandraedwards.com, you can, download 30 tips to increase energy. And then you will receive twice a month. I send out a short fortnightly note, which is basically about, behavior change, observations related to genetics. And then I give out a very quick 2-minute smart hack on basically, how to optimize ourselves, how to live, our best possible self. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely pop a link to that below. And I do subscribe and read them every so often too. So they are definitely worthwhile doing. If anyone listening enjoyed this show, I would highly recommend subscribing as well. But thank you again so much for your time. I'll let you go out and enjoy Melbourne now that you're all out and about and free to do so. And I look forward to seeing you again in Sydney, speaking at whatever event you're at next.
Thanks, Erica. It's been great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And that's a wrap for this week, Balancers. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found this episode useful to some degree in either steering or determining your definition of balance today. As always, the biggest compliment for us is if you share this episode with someone who you feel might need it, or if you're on Spotify, you can click follow, or on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a rating or review. If you have any suggestions for up and coming podcasts, feel free to shoot us a DM or an email. Our Instagram is @TheBalanceTheory and our email is thebalancetheorypodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, you've always got the option of subscribing to our mailing list. We only send you email reminders when the episodes drop, so you get them fresh out of the oven. No annoying spam, we promise. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and until next time, stay balanced.